Hello. Welcome to Answers. Okay. Why does the moon always face Earth and perfectly blot out the sun on eclipses? It doesn't. It doesn't always do that. It does it, partial eclipses are actually more common than total eclipses. The only reason I answer this question is because it's stupid. I mostly picked intelligent questions, but when you ask such a stupid question, I feel like I have to jump in and say, oh, no, that's not the right information. What are your thoughts on 12-year-olds having kids? This is kind of an interesting question because this is a big concern in America, not necessarily 12-year-olds, but teenagers in general getting pregnant, having kids, and, most people are against it. But here's the thing that I don't understand. We're a Christian nation, not by formation, obviously, but if you're going to talk about what the majority of Americans believe, they mostly believe in some form of Christ Lord. Oh, Christ Lord. So we are a Christian nation in that sense. We're a majority Christian nation, I should say. Our government is supposed to be secular. But if you are a Christian, how can you possibly be against teen pregnancy? I don't get it. Because who gave teenagers a biology that was capable of them getting pregnant? I mean, if you really don't like it that 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old girls get pregnant, then aren't you critiquing God? Aren't you saying, God, why did you do this? People like me, I mean, we can criticize the way we evolved. I mean, there's no one to criticize. You can't say, damn you, evolution, you son of a bitch. But you can say, well, that's the way we evolved, but that's not necessarily what's best for us socially. That's a cold, uncaring, unsympathetic process, that would have us live in caves and hunt bison or whatever. Obviously our use of technology has something to do with the way our brains evolved. So I guess that's really not completely accurate. But human beings by themselves, at our base level, are as a species are not just wonderfully adapted to survival. We have created a society that makes our survival somewhat guaranteed. Of course, our technology might one day make it very easy for all of us to be wiped out quite quickly, but that's a whole other matter. But the point is that for most of human history, we were a struggling species. We were a species that wandered from place to place, eating berries, living 20 years, and food scarcity and no agriculture, no permanent civilizations, no towns, probably not much going on in the way of art or philosophy or anything like that. So that was the majority of human history, That's what evolution gave us. Everything else we got on our own. We got it with the tools that we were given up here, but they were by no means easy to come by. So most of what we have, we got through social evolution, not biological evolution. So the atheist is in a position to criticize teen pregnancy, but if you're a theist, I don't think you have that right. I think that you are basically spitting in God's face at that point, right? I would think so. You're criticizing the way He made us. So I think in a majority Christian nation, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to make a big hullabaloo out of a teen pregnancy. The other interesting thing is that teen pregnancy is a lot lower in highly atheistic countries. In the Western world, America is the black sheep that has this huge epidemic of teen pregnancy. In most other westernized countries where religion is nowhere near as prevalent, you don't see nearly as much teen pregnancy. And I don't think there's a direct correlation between religion and teen pregnancy. I think that there is a direct correlation between a country that's stupid enough to embrace religion and a country that's stupid enough to have high teen pregnancy rates. So I think the correlation is the stupidity, not the religion. Anyway, how would the legalization of all drugs better society? Or do they have to better society to be decriminalized? I don't think they have to be. I don't think they have to better society to be decriminalized. I think just having more freedom is ultimately better. That freedom of choice. And there's no... I don't buy into any sort of logic that says that the government should be able to control what you put in your own body and how you affect your own mind. Because let's remember, these drugs are affecting the mind. Outlawing drugs is thought crime. It is Orwellian, and pretty much every country on the planet does it. Every country on the planet does it. Some countries have a far more liberal view of drugs than we do, but there's no country that just says, yeah, you can put whatever you want to in your body, and it's your right. We don't yet have that nation. And America's not going to be the first to do that. It's going to be one of those European countries that's already flirting with it. Prohibition doesn't work. Outlawing drugs has not stopped anyone from taking them, and we shouldn't want to stop people from taking them in the first place. It's none of our damn business what other people do, unless it's affecting us directly, and other people doing drugs does not affect us directly. And when it does affect us directly, it's mostly because of the criminalization of drugs. You know, if crack is on the black market, then they can charge a lot of money for it, and that means that crackheads have to steal to afford it. If heroin is on the black market, heroin prices are through the fucking roof, and a junkie has to steal, your stereo out of your car in order to have money for his dealer to give him the heroin that he needs. But if it's on the white market, the above ground market, and it's brought to you by Pfizer or someone like that, then there's not as much of a negative impact there. There's not as much of a stigma, and because of that, there's not as much of a price hike. There's no great danger associated with the manufacture of these products and the distribution of them. And therefore the prices go down, and therefore there's no crime based on this. And remember that most gangs in America fund their operations almost solely through the sale of illegal drugs. So if you get rid of illegal drugs, you get rid of gangs, because that is their ticket to economic viability. They all, the best way to deal with the black market, to get rid of a black market, is to make it a white market. The best way to get rid of an underground is to make it come above ground. So I think that legalizing drugs is a tremendous benefit to this country and any other country for that matter. I find your explanation that Christians exist because they are stupid rather unconvincing, as there are obviously some rather bright ones out there. Do you think it might have more to do with self-delusion than intelligence? I think that there are two basic kind of Christians, and there are the leader sect, and there are the small group of Christians at the top, and then there are the follower sect, and they're the vast majority of Christians. And the vast majority of Christians are stupid. Not all of them are stupid. Sometimes intelligent people get, huckstered in, but mostly it's stupid people who need something in their life. Or it's people who are intelligent, but they pretend to believe it for social reasons, because, they don't want to be ostracized from their families. They don't want to be pariahs within their communities, so they believe it out of social pressure. So basically they're weak-willed. So you have the weak-willed, and you have the dim-witted, and then you have this upper tier of Christianity. And these guys are pretty smart. And they, maybe some of them believe in God, but I think most of them are probably secret atheists who like to have a little bit of power over people. They like to act as though, yeah, God is talking to me. And what he said was that you should be giving me your money. I think that's how it works. That's my observation. Maybe sometimes these guys really believe there's a God, but if they really believe there's a God, they really believe that that God wants them to make buku bucks off of their parishioners or their congregations. So I think that a lot of the people who you think are these intelligent Christians are really not Christians, or they're not Christians in the way that you think of a Christian being. They are the ones who are propagating the lie. They're the corrupt government official that doesn't really believe what he's saying, but says it anyway to control the people. And that's what religion really is. It's a mechanism for controlling people. It's a way of saying, it's a way of legitimizing totalitarianism. Because if you have this edict that you want people to follow, and you say, hey, from now on we're not eating pork, people would be like, what the fuck is he talking about? I like pork. Fuck off. Fuck you. Fuck off, buddy. No one cares. So, you come back the next week, hey, I talked to God. He said he doesn't want us to eat pork. Oh, shit. I ain't fucking with God. He's all powerful. So it's a way of making your dictatorial whims carry a little bit of weight. Yeah, this isn't me saying that. This is a big guy up in the sky. He wants us to stop eating pork and to not wear polyester and shit. What really goes into one of your Amazing Atheist videos? Like, how many takes and what preparation do you put into those kind of things, and do you enjoy that? It depends on the video, really. Some videos that I do on the Amazing Atheist channel, we can just turn on the camera and I can do a take, maybe two, and that's it. It's just the way it is, and it's good. Other times it's very difficult. Other times it's rigidly scripted, and it's very hard to deliver, the way I want, and it just doesn't come as naturally. It depends on the subject matter. It depends on how naturally passionate I am about the thing I'm talking about. Because a lot of times, there's not a tremendous amount of passion in my soul for every little thing that I do on that channel, but I have to sell it. I can't just come out there and be like, well, this happened, but I don't really give a fuck, because that's not an entertaining video. I have to come out there and not fake passion, because that would be wonderful if I could just fake it. I can't do that. I actually have to dig into myself and find the part of me that cares and bring that to the surface, and that can take a lot of work. Is it a fun process? I'm not a fun person. I'm not about fun. I don't care for it. I've never been particularly impressed with it conceptually. But, it is a process that I enjoy. It's not like a wild, non-stop adventure, but, we do enjoy the process. There's joking, and it's jovial, and it is satisfying to see people commenting on something that I did, and to shower me with approval and praise, or scorn and hatred. Either way is pretty good, as long as they're interested and they care. So yeah, I think that's what really matters to me about it. But when it comes to just like, woo, honestly, I'm not really that kind of guy. I don't get that amped up about things usually. Um, and let's see, was there any other questions in there? No, I guess not. Would you die for your beliefs? For example, citizens all over the Middle East are taking to the streets, even though it could mean their lives. I don't know if I have any beliefs that I would view as being worthy of dying for, because I have a problem with self-sacrifice. It's basically this. I don't see the benefit in dying for something so that other people can have this, whatever I'm fighting for. You know, if I'm fighting for a better world, then I'm fighting for a better world for me. My own self-interest. I don't, I want a better world for you, but I'm not willing to die for it. I don't have that much affection for my fellow man. Now maybe there will come a day when I have, children, or I have someone carrying on my legacy, and I can say, well, it's more important that they carry on my legacy. And then maybe I could wrap my head around the idea of self-sacrifice. But as things are, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I care enough about other people to die to make the world better for them. And there's no guarantee that the world would get better. I've never seen any good evidence that self-sacrifice accomplishes much. We hang the flag up in our schools and we say, oh, the soldiers, they died for our freedoms. Well, where the fuck are they? They died for our freedoms, and we're sitting here in fucking school listening to you yammer on, some underqualified idiot trying to teach us a scrubbed down version of American history, or a primitive version of the sciences that doesn't even really instill any sort of genuine passion in people. That's not freedom. And, it's not freedom when you grow up and you can't smoke a joint, or you can't, go out in public with your fucking cock hanging out, or whatever you want to do. There's not a lot of freedom here, and we don't really fucking have much of an emphasis on freedom. And even most people who say they like freedom, they don't actually. They're not really interested in freedom. They want their freedom to do their shit. But someone else wants a freedom, that they don't like. They're willing to, oh, no, that's not a freedom, because that affects me. Because you can always come up with some conceivable way that something affects you. Oh, no, naked people in public, that affects me, because I don't want to see that shit. Oh, smoking, secondhand smoking. Profane language, no, that offends me. So you can always come up with some excuse about how other people's behavior is affecting you. But I think it's just important to remember that you have the right to not be attacked. Short of that, you have no fucking rights. I don't think you have the right not to be offended, but America says you do. And that's a huge detriment to our freedom. America says you have the right to not be disgusted, you have the right to not be offended, you have the right to not breathe in secondhand smoke. So that's a huge detriment to true freedom. And what was the question again? Oh, dying for my beliefs, right? So yeah, these soldiers all died for the freedoms that we supposedly enjoy, but we don't enjoy them. Where are they? And then, plenty of people have died in revolutions, fighting for a better future in their country, and then, not received it. How many people died in the Chinese Cultural Revolution for a worse China? How many people died fighting for a free Cuba, only to wind up with, Fidel Castro? How many people have liberated their country from one despot only to wind up with a brand new despot, sometimes even worse than the one that they so valiantly sacrificed their lives to get. So much self-sacrifice is in vain. So many people die for an ideal that is never realized. And that's another reason that I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Seriously, though, I want to know, what is the one thing that drives you to continue making the videos you make? What is the drive of the Amazing Atheist and or TJ? Is it the ignorance of modern society, or is it something more personal, something closer to home? What drives the Amazing Atheist? What drives all this shit? Take a swig to think about this. There's probably a few things that motivated at this point. Money is a good motivator. I do make some money off of being the Amazing Atheist, but I did it for a long time without that incentive. The main incentive is just attention. I don't think you can do this without being an attention whore. I don't think that you can do this without being someone who is just a whore who bends over for a sub count and a view count. Now, this channel is supposed to be something a little bit different. This is supposed to be more therapeutic, I think. And for me to help, it helps me organize my thoughts to talk to someone else. But on the Amazing Atheist channel, there's definitely a need for people to pay attention to me. For people to say, oh, well, isn't that clever? And that's a lot of the motivation. I think a lot of the motivation, too, is, there's a lot of anger inside of me. And I find it's not anger about anything in my personal life. I'm not angry at the little things that happen for the most part. Sometimes I can, oh, you fucking toaster, you burnt my toast or whatever, and I can play that up, but the real things that anger me are just the state of the world. I read the news every day, and the news makes me just furiously angry every single day that I read it. Now, there's some days that there's some days it doesn't make me angry. It just puts me in a very depressed place for a moment, and I have to kind of pull myself out of it and be like, well, but most days it's just like, fuck! And that fury has to go somewhere, and I think the Amazing Atheist channel is a great place for that. And, I like the artistry of it, and I hate that I'll probably never be considered an artist by most people, because well, at least not for that, because there is a great element of performance there. And I'm not the most naturally talented of performers. I realize that. I've always had a lot of great strengths as a performer, but I realize that I have a lot of weaknesses too. And I basically think of myself as a stand-up comedian, although most of what I do is, not most of what I do, but a lot of what I do isn't really comedy. But a lot of what George Carlin did really wasn't comedy either. If you listen to a lot of his routines, there's often like good 4 or 5 minute chunks, especially in his later sets, that are really not stand-up comedy routines. He's really just bitching about the state of the world, and a lot of that's what I do. But I do try to, inject a lot of humor into it, and make people laugh, and do the comedic, exaggerated reactions to things like, and I do a lot of impressions, and you do the little redneck character like, God damn you, I can't believe this bullshit is going on in America. The America that my daddy done fought and died for in the Gulf War, and whatever. It just a Gulf War. Yeah, it's kind of strange. That's old enough now for people's fathers to have died in it. But yeah, there's an element of art to it, and I like having a creative outlet. So there's a ton of reasons, but I'm lying if I say that the base reason is not just attention whoredom. What are your views on routine male infant circumcision and its prevalence in the United States? Do you believe governments such as Australia have done the right thing in banning cosmetic circumcision in public hospitals? The circumcision thing is such a difficult issue because it's hard to convince a lot of Americans that something that their parents did to them that they are living with is wrong. Because it happened to them when they're infants. They don't remember it. So they don't have a good view of it. And then there's a lot of studies that have come out that have said it's cleaner in this way or that way to not have a foreskin, or it's harder to transmit sexually transmitted diseases and stuff like that. So there is a little bit of medical research on the side of the people who advocate for circumcision, but I think that it's kind of missing the point, because there's probably tons of stuff on the human body that we might be slightly better off in one way or another without. Maybe it turns out earlobes are not so wonderfully necessary. We could just snip. I don't think involuntary surgery performed on infants is a good idea. I don't think that is something that should be encouraged. I have nothing against circumcision. If it's something that someone chooses to do. And I don't see what's wrong with that. I don't see what's wrong with waiting until someone's, 12, 13, 14 years old and saying, okay, well, do you want a circumcision? And they can say, oh, well, I like the way that looks and I want that for my penis. And, they go do it. I have a sneaking suspicion that most people would become fairly attached to their foreskins, though. I was, offered by my parents when I was like 13 or 14, do you want to have your foreskin removed? I was like, yeah, I don't think so. I'm gonna stick with it. I'm not really into the idea of lobbing body parts off. And despite the stigma around it, I have distinct memories of being made fun of as a kid in like the locker rooms and shit for having a foreskin. But who cares? Fuck them. There's always going to be people who aesthetically prefer that. And if aesthetics are what's important to you and you want to chop your dick off, be my guest. But, don't do it to your kids. Don't do it before they have the fucking ability to say no. It's just not right. Your justifications for it are so paltry and weak that they're almost laughable. They would be laughable if what you're doing wasn't so horrendous. Okay, so yeah, and in Australia, I agree wholeheartedly with their decision. Would you ever move to a different country? Under which circumstances? In which country? No. I'm in it for the long haul. Paul's ego was asked the same question in his last video, and his response was basically, I'm in it because, I'm principled and I'd feel like I was running away and so on and so forth. That's not my reasoning at all. My reasoning is that I'm just American through and through. And there's no divorcing me from my country. My identity is just too contingent upon my being American. And it's not because I'm a proud patriot, because I'm obviously not. It's because I'm such a proud dissident. It's because so much of who I am is the guy who criticizes America. I don't want to be somewhere else. I want to be here because this is where the action is. And I think this is where the action is going to continue to be. The only way I would move is if I had codependents, like children. And I saw this country going in such a negative direction that I just didn't want them to have to be subjected to it. But it would kill me inside to leave this country. Not because it's so great, but because it's my shitty country. It's the place where when I bitch about politics, when I bitch about corruption, I'm bitching about America. And I can only do that when I'm here. I would not feel right bitching about America from over in fucking Europe. I just feel like an asshole. Like I feel like most Europeans who bitch about America are assholes. Bitch about your own fucking countries. And quit blaming America for your fucking problems. Even if we are to blame, it just still comes across badly to me. It's like the neighbor who is constantly complaining about their redneck neighbors with the fucking hubcaps there. Oh, their yard looks like a piece of shit. God damn them, dragging our property's value down. It's like, you know what? Mind your own fucking business. Let those people live their lives and you live yours, and everyone can have their own fucking values. But for me, I live here. If you're living in the house that has the hubcaps in the front yard, you can fucking tell everyone else, God damn, we got these fucking hubcaps out of the yard. We look like a bunch of fucking goddamn scumbags. So yeah, that's my impression anyway. In lieu of getting deep inside you, is there one thing, one past misdeed, one character flaw, one aspect of yourself that you would like to rip out and utterly destroy? I don't have a need to rid myself of character flaws. I like my character flaws. My flaws are what make me me. If there's one thing I want to get rid of, it would be the lack of will to do certain things. Like sometimes shit will go down and I'll be kind of like apathetic to it, and then later on I'll find myself wishing that I hadn't been so apathetic, or something will need doing and I'll just put it off and put it off and put it off out of laziness, really. I do a lot of things, but when I'm done, I kind of collapse into just total apathetic, total aloof shutdown, and it's not nothing holds any interest for me, and I'm not really particularly interested in my responsibilities or obligations or any of that, or I'm not motivated to do much of anything other than sit there like a wart on a hog's ass, and I don't want to be that way. I'd like to constantly be motivated and constantly be moving and constantly doing things. But I don't have the energy, so I wish I had that. I wish I had that constant, inexhaustible well of energy and willpower and focus. So I guess that's what I changed about myself, because I feel like I could accomplish so much more if I had that sort of tenacious and irrepressible spirit. Have you had any fights, verbal or physical, with Cody since you started living with him? It's very difficult to have a fight with Cody. It's mostly a struggle for me to... He's one of those friends that you try to get a rise out of and consistently fail, and I could probably do it, but you'd have to go so far that it's just not worth it. You can't just do it with simple teasing, because he responds very well to that, and he can give it back easily. But I'm pretty thick-skinned too, so there's really not a lot to argue about. He's a very laid-back individual. And so am I in my way. I mean, it sounds weird for me to tell YouTube that I'm laid back. It's a very odd and self-conscious moment because I know that you've all seen me overreacting to things tremendously, and it's probably pretty hard to accept the idea of me being laid back in any way, but I usually am pretty much. Um, and I have a thick skin. I don't typically get highly offended by things. I do have a temper, though. Cody really doesn't have much of a temper. I do. Scotty definitely does. So there's a potential for anger there, but Cody really doesn't do much to make me angry. The things that make me angry are the things that Scotty does, and that's why me and Scotty constantly get into fights. Usually not physical, but verbal, yeah, pretty often. Um, Although, I think we've both kind of gotten better. I think mostly, Scotty's kind of become more conditioned to. I think Scotty's kind of had a revelation in the last few months or so that his anger really isn't accomplishing that much for him. It really doesn't do him much good to criticize others as heavily as he does. Uh, he's become much more interested in solving problems than just taking out his aggression. Um, and so we've gotten in far less fights in the last few months than we ever have in the entire time we've been brothers over like 20 years. Well, more than 20 years, 23, 24 years. Um, so yeah, that's but he and I have much more clashing personalities than Cody does with me or with him. There's just not a lot to clash with Cody about because he doesn't take a strong stand on anything, and um, he's kind of submissive too. He doesn't really. He kind of goes with the flow. When things are going in a certain direction, Cody's very likely to go in that direction as well. Um, you know, when he doesn't, he's very passive aggressive in the way he handles situations too. Like if he doesn't like something, he's very unlikely to say, let's say we're driving around looking for a restaurant to eat at. He's very unlikely to say, I don't want to go there, or let's not do that. He's very likely to say something like, "Oh, well, the last time I went there, my steak was burned. Well, not burned because he likes it like that. Last time I went there, my steak was, it didn't taste good, or they weren't that good last time we went there." It's basically like this subtle way of trying to manipulate people's perception. He very rarely comes out and says, "Fuck that place." Um, so it's a good thing ultimately because it enables people to get along in the social situation we find ourselves in. But it's a very interesting dynamic to me because you have me and I'm kind of the lazy, just don't really want to do much other than what we absolutely have to do. And then there's Scotty, who is very high strung and wants everything done a certain way. And then there's Cody, who has his own way of doing things and his own little pace and methods. And you can get him to do what you want, but you never really know if he's going to do it the way you want, or if he's going to do it his way or whatever. So it's just an interesting interaction, and I think that me and Cody are both more artist types, and then Scotty is more like a business type. Although I have a little bit of businessman in me, and I think Cody has the potential for that in some ways because he is a good negotiator and a good people person, and is generally liked by people who meet him. I don't know. This answer is going like 1,000 different directions. I'm basically talking about the character of people around me. I don't know if it's fair to necessarily even talk about the people around me either, but I've already started, so I guess I'm just in it to win it at this point. Um, but it's kind of we've kind of formed this little this unit, we're we're essentially we're essentially a family, I guess you could say. Um, we live together. We rely on each other. We um, we definitely count on the things that everyone else brings to the table. We count on Scotty to have the ferocity and instinct that he does, and we count on Cody to have um, the talents and abilities that he does, and we count on me to be able to perform the way I do. And if anyone doesn't bring that to the table, then the whole operation kind of sinks. And I guess that's pretty important stuff. Um, and without I think that in a lot of ways we supplement each other's faults. I think that me and Scotty are a good team because he has what I lack, which is that tenacity and um, that can do, don't give up kind of spirit. And he's always prodding me to do the things that I know I need to do, but I don't, but I'll fight tooth and nail not to do because I just, want to laze about. And then, it's good for Cody too because he has that same sort of thing going on. And then I think that Cody and I complement each other really well because Cody loves to be behind the camera. He loves to edit videos. And he feels very proud of the stuff that we do together. And I always like being in front of the camera and doing that. And I'm not really married to the behind the camera process. I'm not a guy who sets up interesting shots, and I'm not a guy who is very good at editing. I sometimes, in fact, kind of pretty usually edit over his shoulder, but I usually let his instincts be the dominant ones because they're better than mine when it comes to editing. We definitely have very different approaches to how we edit the videos because the way he edits them is that he finds the very interesting core stuff and rolls with that. And when I'm editing my own stuff, it's very hard for me to take the garbage and put it on the floor, basically. It's very hard for me to trim the fat and get it off of the steak. He's not as married to that, so you end up with more taut and innovative performance pieces because the weaker parts of the performance are cut out. And obviously, people on this channel probably don't have much of an appreciation for that because they're watching a fucking hugely long video that's completely unedited. But for the YouTube audience at large, it definitely helps to have that sort of eye for what works and what doesn't, and an objectivity about it, because I have no objectivity about it. It's not till months later that I see my performances again that I realize what was actually good and what I just thought was good because I'm an egomaniac, which I am, a highly egotistical person. And I'm a genuine egomaniac. Cody has this... he tries to be an egomaniac, but he's not. He cares way too much about other people. I'm not saying he cares too much, like, that Cody, he's weak for caring. I'm saying he cares too much to be an egomaniac like me. And I don't think that's a desirable trait. But I am. Let's see. As a liberal, what are the specific economic changes you'd like to see? Well, I was just talking about this with my brother last night, and Scotty basically said, the next great economist, the next person who is recognized as a great economist, the next, Adam Smith is going to be someone who figures out a way to build an economy that isn't contingent upon population growth, because populations just aren't growing the same way they used to, at least not in the developed world. So that's a problem, because our economics are kind of contingent upon that growth. They're hugely contingent upon having a bigger group of young people than we have of old people, because old people are the ones who get most of the entitlements. And that's fair because they worked for them. But without a large enough tax base on the amongst the younger generations, it's hard to support those entitlements, and that's why a lot of our entitlements are in danger, not just here in America but also abroad. And I think that part of the solution would be a revamping of the tax code, and I think everyone wants this, but we're not quite sure what to do. I believe that income tax should be eliminated for all people they're making under $500,000 a year. I think income should not be taxed unless you're making a lot of money. If you make under $500,000 a year, you should only be subject to taxes that are directly related to those benefits, Social Security, Medicare, other entitlements. That should be the sole tax burden on you, aside from consumer purchases, which is to say, TVs, furniture, cars, stuff like that. No taxes on food, because that would unfairly penalize the poor for being poor, and that's certainly something we don't want to do in this country. At least something I don't want to do in this country. I think that would be a good thing. Another way you could possibly do the tax code, and this might be a solution that appeals to libertarians, is you leave the tax collecting up to the state, and then the state itself pays the federal government. In other words, you don't pay money directly to the federal government, you pay money to the state, and then the state pays money to the federal government, and they can collect taxes however they want. They just have to deliver a certain amount based on, their GDP and all that, So it would give each individual state the opportunity to come up with their own solution, come up with their own tax code based on, whatever they think works best. And obviously, if a state stumbles upon something that works really well, other states can adopt that. The problem is with that I think a lot of southern states would adopt tax codes that are very unfair to the indigent, simply because they are heavily controlled by Republicans, who are, of course, absolutely obedient to the almighty dollar. They want to make tax codes that heavily favor the rich. And they're going to fuck the poor in the process, because if you don't get enough money from the rich, you're going to have to get enough money from the poor. So that's never good. That being said, it would still be superior to our current tax code, which is so absolutely convoluted and just nonsensical. There's no reason to tax income on someone making, $50,000 a year. Well, why are you going to take their money? They might need that money. It's better to tax their purchases, their non-food purchases, because if they're buying a TV, then they can afford to pay some taxes on that TV. They might not be able to afford just taxes on their income in general, and it's just so hard to sit there and fill out these big long forms, and how many children do you have, and are you married, and if you get a tax credit if you drive this kind of car, and it's just this non-fucking stop. It's just hugely complicated and totally, and there's no justification for income tax. Beyond a certain level. I mean, if you make $500,000 a year, sure, income tax, because you're rich. You can handle it. You can take the blow. But not everyone who makes under $500,000 a year can. It depends largely on where you live, what you do, how stable your income situation is, and all that. So that's something you could do. The changes I would like to see are just anything that will um, enable a greater social safety net, anything that will raise up the poor, anything that will minimize income disparity. I don't like there being a giant class of rich people. I don't mind some people being wealthier than others because I think that you have to incentivize innovation. Um, but I don't think there should be people who literally have more money than hundreds of thousands of people combined. And we have that in this country. We have people that have multi-billion-dollar fortunes. They could literally buy entire towns and just not even fucking fuel it. That's too much money. No one should have that much money because with that much money comes a tremendous amount of social influence. And no one should have that much social influence. It's too much power for one person to wield. Um, anyway, that's just my opinion. But it's right. Within the last 50 years, what president do you feel was the most competent, the least? Okay, so last 50 years, so that would be going back to 1961, right? So Kennedy and Johnson and Nixon, um, and then Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama. Um, Most competent. Well, what do you mean by competent? I mean, when you say competent, does that? I don't know why I'm asking you a question like you respond. But if when you say competent, you're referring to their ability to achieve their own objectives, then I think pretty much all the presidents have been really good at it. Most of the presidents have accomplished the things they've set their minds to. You know, if you're president, you can get shit done. That's kind of the perk of being president. You have tremendous political power because you got the veto. And if you sponsor a bill, you can really fucking push people to support you on it because you are the fucking president. So, most presidents get what they really want. Maybe Carter is probably the least competent. I think, when it comes to really fulfilling your political will and getting your shit done, Carter probably did it the worst. When it came to absolutely getting your political will done, I think Bush was probably the person who did the most. He really accomplished his goals of lining his friends' pockets with money. If you're talking about competence as interchangeable with service to the American people, then it's a very different story. I think that the president who best served us in the last 50 years was probably Kennedy or Clinton, and I'm not saying that they were tremendous benefactors to America, but they did some good stuff. Obama might be on that list too because of Obamacare, which is still being contended, and it's not the best healthcare solution we could have hoped for, but it's personally positively impacted people that I know. It's enabled my friend and co-worker and colleague, partner Cody Weber to be able to be on his mother's medical plan and to get his do his dental shit that he needed done, and it's enabled my girlfriend Holly to be able to go to the doctor on her mom's plan as well. Because you can be on your parents' medical plan until you're 26, and there's a lot of stuff like that. So there's been some positive stuff Obama's done for us too. I also am one of the people who personally thinks the stimulus was a good thing that probably prevented greater economic disaster, but it's pretty hard to prove what would have happened if something hadn't been done. Because that can be argued into oblivion, and there's really no way to ever actually know. So Clinton, Kennedy, Obama, I'd say they've done some good things for the American public, and they've done bad things too. When it comes to people who've done the worst, I think Reagan and Bush too. The original George H.W. Bush was actually not that terrible of a president. He was just, he was there and whatever. But the second Bush, the sequel, and Reagan, those guys, just especially Reagan. Reagan fucked shit up, just horrendously. Basically dismantled the New Deal and probably laid the groundwork for the financial meltdown that we experienced a few years back, that we're still experiencing to this day. Reagan is more to blame for our current economic woes than any other president. So, yeah, I think fuck Reagan. Xena gave her opinion on Wicca and said it was the most accepting, open-minded of all the religions. When it comes to the values, practices aside, and anything else that you may know about it, do you agree with her? I don't know about Wicca being, all that accepting. I think that it's accepting of certain things that a lot of other religions aren't very accepting of. I think if you're like homosexual or something, that Wicca is probably going to be more accepting than Christianity or Islam. But if you're like me, you're like this big, brutish, meat-eating fucking, thug essentially. It's not more accepting of you. It's and I'm very, they're not very accepting of people who criticize Wicca. I'll tell you that much. I mean, if you go to here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. I went to there's a Stickum. It used to be popular. I don't know. People still do Stickum or not. It sucks, so I wouldn't imagine why. But there was a lot of little chat rooms in Stickum, and you'd go and you'd argue with people and fucking call them assholes, and fuck you. And it was like this big clusterfuck of one-upsmanship. And I used to go to Christianity rooms on Stickum, and just I'd argue with Christians. And, we'd have our little debates and our quarrels, and it'd be like, yeah, I just scored a point on you. And I used to do that, and then I went to a Wicca room, and I just hey, I'm an amazing atheist. Gone. Banned. Just, no atheist, fuck you. So I don't think they're more accepting. I think they're probably more touchy, if anything, because they're not as used to criticism. Most people don't bother going after Wicca because, well, who fucking gives a shit? But, if you do, they're very fucking harsh. I mean, if you go to a Wiccan and be like, yeah, Wicca's all bullshit, they'll be like, how dare you? So I don't think they're more accepting. No, I think that's bullshit. I think it's nonsense to claim that they're more accepting. Do you ever think the Earth will have a one-world government? Yes, I do believe that. I don't know when. I don't know under what circumstances. I don't know what culture is going to be the dominant one that ties it all together. But it's happening. I mean, it's going to happen. If you just look at human history, it's just the pattern is so obvious. Okay, we're nomadic hunter-gatherer tribes. Then we're stable tribes that settle in one place. Then we are villages. Then we are towns. Then we are cities. Then we are city-states. Then we are states. Then we are trade, confederations. What do you think the next step is there? Our trend in history hasn't been, let's become smaller and more divided. The trend is always consolidation. The United States, they started as kind of this loose affiliation where every state had, this ability to govern itself to a huge extent. Now, ever since the Civil War, it's been more and more about the federal government, a consolidation of power. And the libertarians hate this, but it's the natural order of things. Power is consolidated, and the greater our technology becomes, the more interconnected our cultures become, the more difficult and the more reliant on one another our economies become, the harder it gets to deny that we're heading towards a complete consolidation of power. I think that we will see a one world government. Probably not in my lifetime, and maybe not even if I end up having kids. Probably not in my kids' lifetime. Probably not even maybe not even in their grandkids' lifetime. But if things go the route they're going and we don't destroy ourselves, then probably in the next few centuries we'll see a one world government emerge. Why is Tim Burton so overrated? I think that Tim Burton is popular because he creates these worlds that are very visually dark, but not dark in any sort of challenging way. I think human beings are attracted to the macabre, but not to the complex, which is what he does. He does things that are macabre, but they're not complex. And I think that's something that appeals to people. We love the dark. We love slasher horror movies, and we love these very dark visuals of monsters and demons and twisted landscapes and skulls and fire, and that stuff has this it has an appeal to us for whatever reason, and yet we don't like complexity. We don't like we're not big fans of ennui and complex moral quandaries or any of that shit. Some of us like that, but those are the weird people like me. And I think Tim Burton gives people what they want. He gives them this taste of this world that's outside of the norm, but he doesn't actually follow through and trifle them with any sort of great moral complexity or any sort of intriguing characters, really. Burton's never been about character. He's always been about visual. And I don't like that, but America loves it. You mentioned juveniles fucking up the language. I know this was most likely a joke, and you're probably not pedantic enough to rage against new words and dialects emerging in the English language. I was wondering what your exact feeling on language changes were. Do you accept the fact that language changes over time and is constantly reinventing itself in ways, or do you genuinely feel as though language is literally being corrupted? I think that language can be corrupted, but I also agree that language has to change. It has to adapt. But I think that for change to happen, you have to have an element that's pushing for change, and you have to have an element that's fighting against it. I think that the pedants have to act as the old guard that makes sure that language is somewhat under control. Because if we all just had this attitude of, well, man, communication, it just means what it means, man, and, it has to change and be free to evolve organically. I think if we just do that, then, if we just accept any new word or new dialect that emerges, unquestioningly, then language really does become corrupted. There's no litmus test. It all just passes. It's like this big fucking torrent of change, and language would just change and splinter so dramatically that we'd have no idea what anyone else was saying, and we would be just incapable of communicating with one another. Language will divide people. It's one of the biggest things that divide communities from one another. It's one of the biggest things that divide cultures from one another and subcultures from one another, is the different ways of speaking. And sometimes even just different dialects of the same language. There's a reason that when I do a stupid person, I automatically default to the redneck voice. It's not even fair. It's just because not everyone who talks with a country accent is stupid. But in America, Most people who talk like I talk associate this here voice with people who are just stupid. That's a big marker to us. Like, oh, that person talks different than me. I therefore associate him with these certain thoughts and beliefs and etc. And it's not really fair, but it's how we think. It's just how we differentiate ourselves. So language is important, and I think that it has to have its vanguards who are I don't know if that's the right word actually. It has to have its guardians who stand by the old ways and fight for the status quo. But it also has to have its people that are challenging the status quo and calling the guardians idiots for being too pedant and too rigid. That way, the words that do get through are ones that are really necessary, and the dialects that get through are ones that are really valid and have to exist. It's like having a dam that only lets a certain amount of water through. It lets the water that needs to get through. And just like the guardians of language, the pedantic fucks that most of us probably think are ridiculous, they only let a certain amount of language get through. And we're all pedantic about something. There's certain words that we all rally against. Even though I'm not against every word that gets invented on the internet, there are some that I no, just don't want it to get through, don't want it to catch on. Like the word butthurt. I never liked that word, never wanted it to catch on, never worked tirelessly trying to minimize it, mocked people who used it, but it did catch on. So it's there. I can't do anything about it. It seems to have minimized itself to some extent, but it's part of the language now, and it's not going away. Have you ever fallen into a deep depression? Not really since I was a teenager. I've never been an individual who was given to bouts of deep depression, at least not in the last decade. Even in the midst of tragedy, there was, I went through a grieving period, but then I returned to my normal self. And it's kind of strange to say because I know that I have a very negative outlook on the world, so it would follow naturally that I would be a bit depressed, but I'm really not. I go about my day. I do what I do. I don't really wallow in the negative for the most part. I have a lot of ambition. I try to I think very very fairly positively about my personal destiny. I'm proud of what I do. I'm fairly happy with who I am. I am somewhat discontented with my laziness, but I don't think anyone has a 100% positive opinion of themselves, and if they do, then they're probably wrong. So I'm not really very depressed. I'm not a happy-go-lucky individual either. I'm not like walking around like the sun's shining, the birds are singing, it's a beautiful day. I'm not one of those fucking cretins either. But I don't really wallow in like misery and despair like I did when I was a kid. As a teenager, I was very prone to depression. Mostly because I was subjected to a lot of stupidity, though. Ever since I've been able, like the very second that I became able to choose who I affiliate myself with, I stopped being depressed. Like, the moment that I no longer had to be around dumb fucks all the time, I felt a lot better about life. And I still feel a lot better about life. Now I just have to read about what the dumb fucks are doing, and that's when I get momentarily depressed, but I don't sink into deep depression. I obviously have my moments of like, oh god, the fucking world's fucked, I'm so depressed, but then it's like, oh, I'll go eat some nachos. So everything turns out okay. Substance abuse, that's the way to go. And food is a substance abuse thing, let's be real. Now that you're older and presumably wiser, do you hate your parents for raising such a spoiled brat who didn't even get a proper education? Okay, well, first of all, fuck you. And second of all, I don't really consider myself a spoiled brat. Um, if I was a spoiled brat, I'd be very much about getting my way all the time. And I'm really not. I live fairly modestly considering my means. The only thing I really allow myself to be spoiled on is eating out more than is probably typical for most Americans. But that's my pleasure. I mean, I do that, and I deserve to have that. I don't buy extravagant clothes. I don't live in opulent surroundings. I don't do any of that stuff. I don't expect anything to be. I don't expect things to go my way all the time. Um, so I don't consider myself spoiled. First of all, second of all, the education I received from my father, at least, was probably far superior than anyone would have in the public or private school systems. Because I was basically taught by a man who was a very harsh realist, a very practical observer of human nature, who gave very concrete advice on how to handle situations and how to deal with human beings. Um, my dad was a very pragmatic person. He was a very realistic guy. He had his little, he wasn't always rational about everything. He had certain, religious beliefs that I thought were silly and stuff like that. But when it came to dealing with people in the real world, he had a very realistic view of how human beings do things and how they think and why they do what they do and how to motivate them and how to get them to do what you want them to do. I think that, one of the things he taught me is that, you really get a lot more out of people by treating them fairly. By giving them what they want. Because if you give them what they want, they'll give you what you want most of the time. And if they don't, then fuck them. Just get rid of them. But I think that's important. And he taught me the ethics of conflict, basically. And he taught me to not take out my aggressions on the people who are important to me, and instead to focus them on the people who are a detriment to me. Basically, he taught me the art of war, his version of the art of war. Not, he didn't open like, oh, we're going to read this book now. But, he taught me those lessons, and I think that's a lot more valuable than, some highly regimented formal education that's mostly lies and, spin to begin with. So I reject both of I reject everything your question is contingent upon. So there is no answer to it. Do you consider yourself more like Dracula or Charles Foster Kane? Well, Charles Foster Kane was basically someone who was blinded by ambitions. I don't think I don't know that. Maybe that'll be a problem down the line, but right now I'm not successful enough to be blinded by ambition. Right now, but Dracula though, I can relate to Dracula, sure. The inhuman aspect of that character, the need for deeper connection, but the inability to get it because of what he is. I think a lot of people feel like that, and that's why that character has endured because we all relate to the lonely. Not all of us, obviously, but a certain kind of person relates to the loneliness of Dracula and sympathizes with his plight, because a good deal of people, even ones that wake up in the morning and smile and laugh and go through the motions, inside they feel totally disconnected from the world, and they need their heroes. And I think Dracula is one of those characters that he's not exactly a hero, obviously, but it gives us someone we can relate to. It's a tragic figure that mirrors some of the tragedy that happens in day-to-day human life. And I think that there's something to be said about the loneliness of the vampire in general. Because I remember when I was in high school, and this is before fucking stupid shit like Twilight came along and kind of tainted the mythology. But I remember when I was in high school and junior high and shit, part of the way that I dealt with my feelings of isolation from other people was that I would drift off into these fantasies about being a vampire, and I'd start to, I'd just walk the halls and pretend that I was this other creature that was just among the mortals, deceiving them, and really they were just my food source. And it was really just me taking my feelings of isolation and the identity of feeling like a pariah and building a mythology around it, giving it these epic connotations. And I think a lot of people do that. I think a lot of men especially start to walk around pretending in their head that they're a superhero or a vampire or drifting off into certain various fantasies about the world, because everyone has a mythology built up around themselves. At least everyone that that I would associate myself with. I mean, I'm sure some people are just dullards who kind of walk around and are like, yeah, I think I'm gonna get some biscuits, and that's all that's on their mind is, yeah, I'm gonna get some biscuits. But for most people that I would associate with, we have these little escapes into different worlds where we're different people, or where our character is exaggerated in some way, where our emotional states are magnified to huge proportions. Who do you think will be the Republican presidential nominee in 2012, and do you think that Obama will be reelected? I don't know who the nominee will be, but I don't see Obama getting defeated. I don't think his approval ratings are low enough for it. The real threat I see to Obama at this point is not the GOP. It's the unrest in the Middle East, because unrest in the Middle East means speculators driving up oil prices, and speculators driving up oil prices means bad approval ratings. It destroyed Carter's administration. High oil price in the Middle East, which Carter really had no control over. They really just destroyed his approval. Bush's approval ratings, they sunk because of high gas prices more than anything else. More than all the horrible shit that Bush did, gas prices really drove his approval ratings into the toilet. Because for some reason, Americans think of gas prices as being indicative of everything else that's going on in the economy. I don't know why. It's not rational, but we all drive. We drive around, and it affects everything. It does, but it's not really an indicator, because it's really based more on what's going on in the Middle East than what's going on here. And then, but it's still indicative, and it's still hugely. It has a huge impact on the entire economy, because if gas costs more, then it costs more to transport foods and goods. And if it costs more to transport, that cost has to be passed on to the consumer. So it raises prices of everything. And that's never good. I mean, high gas prices means high merchandise prices, means high food prices. And, so it affects the whole economy, and the president tends to get blamed for that shit. And, everyone just talks about, the pain at the pump and all that. And it's really something the president has almost no control over whatsoever. But it's kind of funny to me. Me and Scotty were actually talking last night about the fact that if there is a revolt in Saudi Arabia, which is not something that's imminently likely, but if these protests in the Middle East spread to Saudi Arabia, oil prices will go skyrocketing, and literally it will affect the entire world. So, I mean, anyone who wants to destabilize economies across the globe, anyone who is, all they'd have to do is start a revolt in Saudi Arabia, and they would accomplish that objective. But, I think that there's probably so much interest in not having that happen that it probably never will. But, sometimes you can't control the people. Usually you can, but sometimes you can't. Sorry, what question was I on? TJ, how did you deal with your grief from your father's death? I'm grieving at the moment and would like to hear some advice from you. The only way that I mean, there's plenty of people who will tell you all this, you got to do this and you got to do that, but really the only thing you can do is just, hold on and keep going. You just keep living life, and eventually it doesn't become a big deal anymore. Maybe to some people it never stops being a big deal. I don't know, but for me, at some point it doesn't hurt like it used to. Because it just becomes something that happened a long time ago, and every once in a while the memory will crop up, and you'd be like, oh god. But for the most part, you just gotta keep going. That's really all you can do. I feel bad because Paul's ego in his answers video, he answered a question, and basically I don't remember which question it was, but he talked about the 3 kinds of people that he saw in the world, and it was people who look to the future, they live in the future, they have these objectives, and they're pursuing them, and that's me. And then there's people who live in the present, and that's like the happy people that, you're like, woo, go drink a beer, fuck a sheep, whatever, they're not thinking, they don't care. Tomorrow, that doesn't exist. Yesterday, who gives a shit? And then there's people who live in the past, and, I don't know how people who live in the past could deal with grief. I guess they just have to fucking bear with it their whole lives, because they're constantly looking back and remembering, oh man, that was horrible. That what happened to my friend or my father or my mother, my cousin, my brother, or whatever. Whatever happened back then. The personal tragedies. I guess they're always just kind of fresh in the minds of people who live in the past. But that's not me, and I hope it's not you, because if so, you're going to have a lot harder time dealing with it. But I'm a future-minded person. The past is gone. The mistakes I made, who gives a shit? They're gone, too. The people that I lost, well, they're lost to the past. Remember them, carry their lessons, but, you don't dwell on it. I don't dwell on it. And, it kind of made me sad when Paul said that, too, because I realized that it's why I would never be the storyteller that he is, because you can't be a great storyteller if you live in the future. Well, you can, but you pretty much have to make up your own stories, because your own life is just kind of like, oh yeah, well, there was a guy and he gave me a cupcake. The end. You don't remember all the little nuances. And then my cousin at the time, it just all loses its context. It becomes this big jumble of fucking shit that led to the now, which is just leading to this other place. I always imagine that I'll become more past-minded in my older years, when there is no future anymore. Then I'll have to confront the past, assuming I become an old man at some point, and it's death is imminent, and there is no future to look for, and then I'll look at the past and be like, oh, that was my life, and maybe I shouldn't have done that. And, maybe in some ways it's worse to be future-minded, because when you run out of future, then you have to turn back, and it's just probably overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, I'm so filled with regret now. Why didn't I deal with this earlier? So maybe maybe it's not all it's cracked up to be. Maybe it's only the people who live in the moment that are just always going to be pretty good, Day they die, like, well, I'm going to die. Glug, glug, glug. Had a good run. The end, Fucking bastards. At least we can console themselves with the fact that they'll never accomplish anything, most likely. Let's see. I assume food is your vice. My question is, why did you pick this vice instead of smoking, alcohol, or sex? Also, do you think that people tend to be more fascinated when geniuses have vices? I'm probably going to cut this off after this question. I got more, but this is going to be a two-parter. We're already up to an hour and a half here. But I don't think I chose my vice. I think my vice chose me. I don't think that I was sitting around and decided, yeah, I'm going to become addicted to food. And I kind of realized why no diet will ever work for me, why I'm never going to be this like chiseled guy or this skinny guy, why it just cannot happen. Because to me, food is just too damn pleasurable. It's not like I'm not like eating just to eat like some fucking fat fucks do, where it's just like I gotta eat because I'm depressed. I don't really do that. I mean, sometimes I do if I'm in a bad way, but it's not a habit that I have. I don't constantly go to the kitchen and grab some crackers and eat them. My thing is I go out and I eat big meals because I love food. I love it. I love cheap, shitty food. I love expensive, fancy food. I just love eating. I love tastes and textures and the atmosphere of places and the dining experience, and just it makes me feel alive, and it's like one of the very few things in life that I just unquestioningly enjoy, because most things I do, I'm just like too critical up here. There's too much going on, like concerts and shit like that. Like the music doesn't ever overtake me. I don't ever become part of the crowd and like, oh yeah, just give myself to the music or any of that. I don't do that. I'm too standoffish for that. When it comes to like going to see plays or something, I don't do that. I see movies sometimes. I like movies, but I'm pretty critical of that too, so I can really only see movies that I know I'm going to love or I know I'm just going to hate, and I just want to be there to criticize them. But one of the few things that I can really just go and do and be myself and just enjoy myself and have conversation and experience new tastes and textures and life and vibrancy is dining out or just eating a meal out somewhere. And that is something I can't give up. It's not something I even want to give up. It's not even worth it for me. And I finally realized that after trying to do Nutrisystem, and I'm just like, it saps me of my soul to not eat out, to not have that vice supposedly. But I'm a fat fuck. And I'll probably be one, and I'll probably die one. Maybe I'll die a little bit earlier because I am one, but I'm not interested in the alternative. I'm not interested in eating healthy and living right. Sorry. Anyway, I'll pick this up in a day or two.